So welcome to Introduction to Mindfulness at Tubten Norbuling. And just some quick information about this class. We've got 4 dates set up. Fridays in August the 4th, that's today, 11th, 18th, and 25th. So it'll be 4 weeks in duration. I'll try and make each class about 90 minutes and break them roughly into 3 parts with 2 5-minute breaks in between. And so I'll have a little bit of a talk, meditation, some more talk, another meditation, and kind of a wind up at the end. Now, to let you know a little bit about me and this course, I've been a member of TNL for several years now, and I'm currently working on an FPMT teacher certification. So in that, I've completed courses on minds and mental factors with Venerable George Churanoff, and on mindfulness with Venerable Sangye Kadro. Other than that, I have to be honest and say I don't have any special qualifications or realizations with regard to this material. So for that reason, I'll reference quotations quite frequently from authorities and provide explanation, answer questions, and invite your comments as well. TNL, of course, has many excellent resources in terms of teachers. Any of the ordained faculty or lay teachers have greater experience and in-depth knowledge. So I encourage you to consult with them if you have any questions that you don't feel I've answered sufficiently for you. Now, about this course, it's designed to introduce you to the definition, practices, and techniques of mindfulness. You'll learn to apply mindfulness to enhance mental focus by calming your physical tensions and mental agitations. You will better notice your habitual thinking and perhaps even change it through mindfulness. You'll also learn to nurture positive, wholesome inner qualities with mindfulness practice. This course is particularly suited for those who are new to mindfulness and would like to learn simple ways of applying mindfulness in their daily life. To just add a bit more detail, there'll be a fair bit of commentary and quotations, lectures, answering questions if you wish. And then we'll have, in each of the sessions, we'll have 2 meditations. So this is more kind of a commentary or a verbal dialogue about mindfulness. It fits in between Meditation 101, the introductory course that's offered here at TNL, and between more advanced courses on minds and mental factors. For example, the one I just mentioned in the basic program, Minds and Mental Factors, that was offered, I guess, 2 years ago now. And it's frequently offered, at different FPMT centers. So this course is also intended to serve both Buddhists and non-Buddhists, but is definitely based on Buddhist concepts and perspectives. What that means is I'll keep the presentation general where possible to have broad interest and applicability. Beginning meditators are the target audience, but the nature of the material requires some technical explanation. What we're going to do is we're actually going to, beginning with mindfulness, look at some of the aspects of our own mind that we employ during meditation. So the technical explanation, as I mentioned, I'll try and keep it as simple as possible, and that will make it helpful to understand mindfulness and its contexts. So some of the aspects of the mind that support mindfulness and go along with it. And of course, you are all highly encouraged to comment and ask questions to help clarify your understanding. Now, before I go any further, did that brief introduction kind of like bring up any more questions, or do you have expectations that maybe you want to let me know about? You can just raise your hand, raise your virtual hand. All right.
No, I'm fine with your introduction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Susan.
As am I. Yeah.
Thank you, Jay. All right. So let's begin with some prayers. And I think what I might do is just say a few words about the beginning, which is what we call the motivation in a meditation session or in a teaching. So from the Buddhist perspective, the end result, positive or negative, of all of our actions, body, speech, and mind, is of course dependent on the original motivation. If the motivation is good, that is focused on the positive benefit for oneself and others, it will eventually result in a positive income, although at my level anyways, we can't be exactly sure when or what that will be. Another interesting aspect of a motivation is the greater the intended benefit in the motivation, the greater the potential positive outcome. So we're kind of given license here to open our minds a little bit and think big. One of the benefits of setting a strong motivation at the beginning is if naturally our attention or our mindfulness flags during the class, even if we lose track of our motivation, become distracted and so on, a positive motivation keeps the tenor of the entire session positive. So in a way, it's kind of like a guardrail. And then finally, actions of body, speech, and mind guided by a positive motivation generate virtuous karma for us, which is really crucial at the very end when we make our dedication, because what we dedicate is that substance. We dedicate that virtuous karma that we created. And I'll talk about this a little bit at the end, but we dedicate that karma, we direct it, and we seal it. And so that's what makes the motivation so important in beginning our class. So let's begin with the prayers. I'm just going to start with a very simple motivation. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment to friends and hatred for enemies. And may I enact this myself. Well, let's begin with listing out a few of the objectives of this course. So we're going to cover the nature of mindfulness, and we're going to bring in other mental factors that are very closely related to mindfulness as well. I'll explain what a mental factor is in a moment. But briefly, it's just an aspect or function of the mind, if you will. So the nature of mindfulness, and then mindfulness and meditative concentration. You can think of it as focus. In particular, at my level, it's just basically, the focus or concentration that we develop once we have a support of mindfulness. And then moving from mindfulness to meditative concentration, We go to discerning wisdom, intelligence, analysis, whatever you want to call it, realizations, learnings. And then finally, we'll say a few words throughout this course about mindfulness in daily life. In terms of the nature of mindfulness, so we'll talk a little bit about how mindfulness helps us engage with the chosen meditation object without distracting us, without distraction, through the power of becoming familiar with that object. And in terms of mindfulness and meditative concentration or focus, we'll use mindfulness, you apply mindfulness to the object of the meditation to support deeper concentration accompanied by calming the disturbances of the body and the mind. And then we'll also get into a little bit the two types of obstacles or hindrances to the practice, which are called dullness and distraction. We won't talk about this in this first session. We'll get to those later. The first session we'll do just a lot of kind of defining what it is in more detail, defining all these words that I'm using. And then in terms of mindfulness and discerning wisdom, you can think of it as intelligence or realizations, learning. We'll apply mindfulness to support discerning wisdom in examining the object of mindfulness, such as thoughts, for example. And then we'll also apply mindfulness to support discerning wisdom in examining, evaluating, and nurturing positive, wholesome qualities. How do we do that in a meditation session? And then finally, in terms of mindfulness in daily life, we'll make use of the appropriate methods to support and reinforce mindfulness in our daily life. And in fact, mindfulness is present off of the meditation cushion as well, believe it or not. Okay, this course has no required readings, but there's quite a bit of material out there. There's an in-depth and scholarly treatment of mindfulness and introspection and this relates to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but there's also perspectives from the Pali tradition, that is the earliest sources of the Buddhist sutras. And they can be found in the book called Following in the Buddha's Footsteps. And that's by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama and Thubten Chodron. And in particular, that's in chapter 11. And then for a general introduction, we have this text here. I don't know if you can see it too well. There we go. It's called How to Meditate, a Practical Guide. And it is by, I'm sorry, I lost my place here. It is by Kathleen McDonald, who is, well, AKA Venerable Sangye Kadro. And then the Attention Revolution is, says Unlocking the Power of the Focused Mind is by Alan Wallace. If you'd like me to email you any of those references so you don't have to worry about writing them down, I'm happy to do that. Just let me know at the end of the class. So that's a quick introduction. Did any kind of thoughts arise, or anyone want to make any comments or anything else at this point? Excellent. Okay, so we'll get into the course material here. We're going to dive in, and this is not unusual in these types of presentations. We're going to define a few terms so that we have kind of a clear idea of what we're talking about. And we can talk about the mind right now. And the mind, really, we can think of it as our subjective consciousness that perceives moment by moment a meditation object as a whole. And the mental factors simultaneously apprehend or engage with aspects of that meditation object in specific ways. And I'll explain those specific ways. I'll give you examples of those mental factors, of course. A mind and its mental factors arise together simultaneously. They can't be separated. So, for example, you can't have mindfulness without the mind. I mean, I guess that makes sense. So the mind is basically, you could think of it as the ground. And then mindfulness is one of the activities that happens on that ground. In Buddhism, the mind is not conceived to be merely a general reservoir of information or just the brain mechanism. But when we say mind in Buddhism, what we mean are the individual moments of subjective knowing, that is, our perceptions, and the continuum of which makes up our sense, that is, experience of knowing. So that's a definition of the mind. And then within the mind, we have these certain aspects or factors that are operating. And they're called mental factors. So you could say that a mental factor is a component of the mind. That is, it's an aspect, a characteristic, a quality, or ability of the mind that apprehends or engages with the meditation object. I say meditation object, but our mind functions outside of meditation, of course. So it's really any kind of mental object. These mental factors are always in play. So again, it's not just on the meditation cushion that we encounter these things. Often, though, we're busy doing something. We're working on the computer, we're driving around, we're talking to people, we're interacting. So we're not so much aware of all of these things. That's why the meditation cushion is a special place, and sometimes a surprising place, because that's where we begin to see these things actually operating. So of the mental factors, there's different lists and groupings of them. And one commonly used in this tradition has 51 mental factors, and they're divided into 5 groups. Now, please don't get nervous. We'll only talk about maybe 4 or 5 of them. So we'll stop there. We won't talk about the others. So these are just the basic operating factors in our mental continuum. I mentioned 3 of them already. So mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom are 3 of the mental factors we'll cover, and we'll define those tonight, and then give examples and analogies as to what they are and how they function in our mind. So this is where we're beginning. We're going to begin with a definition of mindfulness and then peel back the covers a little bit to demonstrate what's going on inside the mind and how, according to this presentation, how the mind works. Here's the definition of mindfulness, and it may be different from other definitions that you've heard elsewhere. But this is a pretty classic definition in Tibetan Buddhism. Mindfulness is a non-forgetfulness of the mind with respect to a familiar meditation object of perception more generally. And it has the function, mindfulness that is, has the function of non-distraction. So it basically, what it does is it just keeps that object in the mind. And you can just imagine, well, mindfulness is like, the clips on the bottom stage of the microscope that hold the specimen there in place. That's what mindfulness is. It can have synonyms like remembering the meditation object, memory, or non-distraction. We'll add one extra aspect to that definition in a moment. Concentration, and I should say, let me say this now. Mindfulness kind of leads into concentration, which leads into wisdom. So they are linked in a way. Maybe, I don't know if you can really say they are like sequential, one after the other, but that the first supports the second, which supports the third. So mindfulness supports concentration, which supports wisdom. They may actually be operant simultaneously. But typically we begin with mindfulness, and that's where we're going to spend a lot of time talking about mindfulness and how to foster it, how to support it. So the second one, following on from mindfulness, is concentration. And concentration dwells single-pointedly on a meditation object. Once you have that object established stably in your mind, then you can start to look at it. You can start to concentrate on it. If the object is stable in your mind, then you can begin to really delve into it and look at it. So concentration dwells single-pointedly on a meditation object in a sustained way. And it has the function of supporting wisdom, which is the next one. The more intense our concentration, the more acute our observation of the meditation object becomes. And its synonyms are focus, meditative stabilization. In Sanskrit, the word used is samadhi. And then thirdly, we have wisdom. If we can keep a meditation object or a mental object in our mind stably, and then begin to apply concentration to it, then we'll begin to discern, discriminate, characterize, evaluate that object, and begin to have realizations about that object. So that's wisdom, is the final stage of that series of three. Mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So wisdom discriminates, characterizes, and evaluates the features of the meditation object, illuminating it like a lamp lights up a picture in a dark room. So synonyms that we'll use for it are intelligence, comprehension, understanding, discerning analysis. So those are three mental factors that I've just introduced: mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And the first supports the second, which supports the third. So that's a lot of words. But you can just kind of, examine your own mind and sort of have a remembering consciousness of, well, when you were able to focus on something. And we often say this, when we talk about it, we'll say, oh, I'm concentrating on something. What our Indian and Tibetan friends have done here is they've broken that down into three separate functions. So don't let that colloquial English usage, I'm concentrating on something, fool you, in the sense that it's not the same as the concentration we're talking about here. So mindfulness kind of flows into concentration and then results in wisdom. That was a quick sketch of those three mental factors. There's much more that can be said. But did that bring up any kind of thoughts or associations, maybe personal experiences? Maybe I didn't say it clearly enough and you've got questions.
No, I thought you were very clear, Stephen. And do I understand then that mindfulness does not necessarily develop into any kind of a state of concentration, it may not achieve that focus. It may just be sort of bouncing around and mindful, but not really aware.
Okay, thank you, Susan, for that question. So mindfulness does result in stability. So when you just, think of all the thoughts that are going through your head, the perceptions and so on, you want to grab one of them. A perfect example is the breath. Suppose we're doing the breath meditation. All we want to do in a breath meditation is, well, meditate on the breath. But the nature of our minds is to bring in all of these other different sense impressions, memories, hopes for the future, plans, whatever. What mindfulness does is it just keeps the breath at the center of our attention. Maybe another way of saying it is keeps our attention locked on the breath.
Okay, that makes it more clear. Thank you.
Okay. And yeah, and thanks for that question, Susan. And anyone else, just jump in. And we've got a small class, so that's great. So that means you can just jump in and, if there's something that isn't quite clicking or I'm not clear on. So again, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And it's almost, in a way, it's a gradation. I would say that there probably isn't like a super clear distinction when you go from like strong mindfulness to concentration. And there isn't like a distinction, a really strong distinction when you go from concentration to wisdom. But they all have basic functions. So it's a little bit of like a conceptual division in what is sort of a holistic and organic process that's happening in your brain. But we break these things apart so we can talk about them and kind of, conceptualize about them. So for mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, as an analogy, these three factors kind of function together like a laser beam. So mindfulness is like the steadiness that keeps the laser beam on the desired spot. So it's like the mounting of the laser beam itself that keeps it pointing right at that exact point that you want it to go. That's mindfulness. And then you could think of concentration is like the intensity and focus of the laser light itself that gives it power. Because we know laser light is not like normal light. It's got way more intensity, but also collimation, that is focus. It's like the photons are organized inside the laser light, and that's what gives it its special power. So concentration is like the intensity and focus of a laser. And then finally, wisdom is like the illumination of the target of that laser that results in some kind of effect. If we're talking about a laser, just like a laser beam, these three factors are neutral. So a laser can be used for something wholesome, like laser eye surgery to correct defects in our eyes, or it can be used as something unwholesome, like as a weapon. So that's just an analogy to kind of pull together these three mental factors of mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, like a laser. Mindfulness is the steadiness of the laser beam. Concentration is the intensity, focus of the laser beam. And the illumination, the effect on the target object is like wisdom, the realization of wisdom, of insight, of comprehension. Something that changes in our brain where we, realize something. So those are the three mental factors. I mentioned that there's a fourth, and the fourth is introspective awareness. Sometimes it's called vigilance. Another word that's used is monitoring, or just a phrase is, it's like a spy in the mind. So introspective awareness isn't actually enumerated in the list of 51, believe it or not, there's 51 enumerated, but it's not specifically enumerated in there, but it's kind of related with intelligence. And what introspective awareness is, and it's a very interesting mental factor. It's a mental factor that's aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it, or should be doing it. So mindfulness and introspective awareness are intimately related. In meditation, mindfulness counteracts forgetting the meditation object. You know, Susan, that's like the breath, the example of the breath. Mindfulness keeps that breath, keeps our attention on our breath when we're doing a breath meditation. So in meditation, mindfulness counteracts forgetting the meditation object, while introspective awareness protects, it detects and protects against and remedies hindrances like restlessness and laxity. So in that example of the breath meditation, I'm meditating on my breath, I'm meditating on my breath, I'm thinking about a beach in Hawaii. Oh, I'm thinking about a beach in Hawaii. I'm thinking about a beach in Hawaii. Oh, I shouldn't be thinking about a beach in Hawaii because I'm doing a breath meditation. That's an example of introspective awareness coming in, just, making it a little bit silly. I apologize for that. But that's an example of introspective awareness coming in and saying, wait a second, you are not meditating on the breath. All right. So put that beach out of your mind and return to the breath. That's kind of the simplest example of introspective awareness. It can also be a little bit more sophisticated in saying, well, I'm meditating on the breath, meditating on the breath. Oh, I was falling asleep. Again, introspective awareness comes in, but then it, prescribes a remedy and says, well, sit up straighter. Pull your chin in a little bit. Focus on the breath up here. Or even imagine a bright source of light in your mind just for a moment and then return to the breath. Those are examples of remedies that introspective awareness has diagnosed the problem of being drowsiness and then applied certain well-known remedies in order to enliven the mind and return the mind to the breath and have an engagement. Remember that it's not just, mindfulness holds the object, but if we're going to concentrate on it, we want to be engaged with that object. We want it to be clear and vivid to us. So introspective awareness helps us with the remedies for, first of all, detecting the problem and then applying the remedies so that we can improve our mindfulness. And when the mindfulness is strong on the breath, we can begin to concentrate on that breath and observe certain things about that breath. If we're concentrated on it, then we can say, well, how is it shallow? Is it deep? Is it up here in my chest? Is it down here? Is the length is it ragged? Is it steady and stable and so on? And then we can begin to make realizations. Oh yeah, I just sat down on my cushion just a few moments ago. So I'm still a little bit, distracted and everything. And so that would be wisdom. One word I've been or little phrase I've been using a lot is meditation object. And really, this is simply the one and only thing the mind is engaged with in the moment. In the context of meditation, we call it the meditation object. But our mind is always engaged with an object, however briefly, however intensely, or however weakly, whether we're in meditation or just going about our daily lives. So objects here in this particular system can be purely mental, internal to the mind, that is, like ideas or concepts, or they may be input from any of our five senses. The Buddhist view is a mind that engages a purely mental object is a mental consciousness or mind, and a mind that engages a sensory object is a sense consciousness or mind. But for Buddhists, the mental consciousness is the most important because it is the one attended and directly affected by the wholesome and unwholesome mental factors. We won't get into all of those wholesome and unwholesome mental factors. But, for example, what might be some unwholesome mental factors?
Well, that brings me to a question.
Yeah,
about
please go ahead.
introspective awareness.
Yeah.
Can it be judgmental? That would be an unwholesome factor, wouldn't it? If it were judgmental, saying, "Oh, look at you! You're thinking about future plans again. You're supposed to be meditating. You need to get a grip. You should." It gets kind of. Can introspective awareness be like that? It's kind of a negative.
Well,
make yourself feel guilty.
Let's raise some hands. How many people in meditation have experienced beating oneself up by saying, "Why can't you concentrate?" Yes, I see there's a few hands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so definitely. So that something unwholesome can creep in, but then you recognize it. That might be kind of a self-centered, like, what actual unwholesome mental factor might that be? That might be like impatience, being self-centered, because like, instead of being patient with yourself, you're being impatient with yourself and getting angry with yourself. Why am I such a bad meditator? I hate it. So that's a really good example, Susan. And, we talk about that, we just say, well, that's not good. You can still notice that your attention is not on the thing that you want it to be. Then there's kind of that process of superimposition of judgmental thinking, where you then superimpose on just that basic observation that you're a bad person because you can't focus on the meditation object, which is something so easy. It's the breath. Why can I not keep my attention on it? And what you do is, as you become more experienced and the actual remedies, you apply them. You don't waste any energy in that unwholesome kind of mental cogitation. I hope that answered your question and didn't bring up any more. Well, if it did, that's good, actually, because you should ask them.
It answered my question. Thank you. It helps a lot.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad. Lorraine, please go ahead. Unless, was that for just saying that you...
No, that's, I did have a question. I'm not sure how much anybody would know about this, but I have this issue where I'm very much affected by diet and external influences as well, where like if my diet is a little bit off, I have a lot of food intolerances. I can't eat a lot of sugar, but sometimes I do because it's there, it's cheap, it's usually free, it's always in my face. And it really affects my ability to focus and several other things as well. Just we live in a toxic environment. I think the toxicity seeps in and really affects on a microscopic, chemical level, our ability to focus. And I don't know, it seems like such an over-encompassing issue that I don't know where to begin to deal with it.
Yeah. So that's, no doubt many people kind of suffer from that. And, I've had similar experiences. I've kind of like over time, I've, been able to come up with some solutions. And generally it's not something that I'm able to take care of in the meditation session itself, but even just having that self-knowledge, I think is really valuable. And at the very least, knowing about yourself, knowing about your intolerances and kind of the physical manifestation of that. And although we say the mind is not the brain, it's still embedded in the brain and also in the body. So any kind of, bodily issues, something as simple as fatigue, or anxiety or whatever, that has a bodily dimension and it can affect our meditation. I don't really know what to say, Lorraine, because, I don't have any medical training or, I'm not kind of a super advanced meditator, and I don't, fortunately, I don't have any kind of significant issues in that area. So I'm afraid I can't really help you. I don't know. Is there anyone else, who might have experienced something similar to what Lorraine has experienced? And
yeah, I really feel what Lorraine is explaining. Absolutely. Toxic environment. Talk about it. I mean, the way I feel the toxic environment is hard to escape. You can't escape, for instance, the pollution or the climate change that you see your friends suffering, your family. And those are things you can't escape, and you have to, it's a kind of toxicity that you have to somehow understand it or get a perspective on it so it doesn't make you feel stressed out. That's the way I feel it anyway. And other things, many other things, just in our society,
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Susan. And I apologize, Lorraine, that I'm not able to help anymore, but I wouldn't want to also do any harm to you.
That's all right. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. So why do we study mental factors? And this is, in a way, this is kind of, well, one of the reasons is to deal with what you might call internal toxicity, emotional toxicity, or mental toxicity. Let me read this. This is from this text here, which is one of the classic texts. It's called The Mind and Its Functions. It's by Geshe Rabten, and it was translated by the great Stephen Batchelor. And he gives us like a really wonderful capsule of why we're even talking about this, why we're taking the time. Why should you spend your valuable time here listening to me go on about mental factors? And what Geshe Rabten says, it is the mental factors that are primarily responsible for leading us to all forms of experience. When the mind is under the influence of unwholesome, toxic mental factors such as attachment and anger, one is led into committing actions that cause experiences of frustration and suffering. But whenever the mind is dominated by wholesome factors such as compassion and patience, then any ensuing physical and verbal activity will only result in happiness and well-being. It is the unwholesome aspects of the mind that are the root of our bondage within samsara, whereas it is the wholesome aspects that allow us to discover freedom from this unsatisfactory condition. Just a quick aside here is that we won't be going into these in particular, but it is mindfulness, concentration, wisdom, and introspective awareness that are the basic tools to recognize the difference between wholesome and unwholesome, and then manage these factors in the way we want to. Okay, back to Geshe Rabten. Since the principal motivating force behind our lives is the desire to find happiness and avoid suffering, it is thus essential to recognize the psychological processes that are at work within ourselves. Only by means of careful examination will we be able to realize exactly what the causes for our pleasure and pain are, and subsequently be able to engage in cultivating certain mental factors whilst discarding others. But as long as the mind continues to be dominated by unwholesome afflictions, then what we basically wish for and what we actually do in order to find it will be completely opposed to one another. Whilst wishing for happiness, we shall only be creating the causes for further suffering. Thus, to investigate the functions, natures, and the effects of various thoughts and emotions that occur within us and to act realistically upon our findings is the very essence and study of the practice of Dharma. And just to hammer the nail in even farther, to persist in trying to manipulate the external material world in order to achieve happiness and dispel suffering is like being concerned about fighting a battle outside, unaware that the enemy is dwelling indoors. Without dealing directly with our own psychological makeup, no real happiness will ever be found within external situations. We shall always find ourselves facing the same problems as the person who does not realize that the enemy dwells within her own house. Thus, the importance of being aware of the way in which the mental factors affect our lives cannot be stressed enough. And there you have it. Well, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to drill down into a bit more of a definition of mindfulness, and we're just going to take apart the sentence that I gave you already. So mindfulness remembers the meditation object, like the breath, for example, through familiarization, preventing distraction. So there's really three elements there. It remembers the meditation object. So in regard to a familiar object, your mind is not forgetful and operates without distraction. So it keeps that object there, the center of your attention, and then it brings it in there and it remembers it, and then it combats distraction. So distraction doesn't even arise. So really, you just break this down into three features. It's observed object. What you're looking at mentally is a familiar object, since mindfulness does not occur with regard to a previously unfamiliar object. Well, we'll unpack that in a little bit. The point here is that mindfulness gets better and better when you become more and more familiar with the object. Oh, interesting. Second, its subjective aspect or manner of apprehension is your mind's not forgetting the object. If your breath stays in your attention, at the center of your attention, you know mindfulness is operating, because subjectively you experience just the breath, none of those other disturbing emotions or distracting conceptions, memories, plans, whatever. And then finally, its function is to keep your attention from wandering from the object of meditation. Well, 2 and 3 sound like very similar. I mean, could you really not remember the object? but still keep it from wandering? No, not really. I don't think so. But it just kind of really reinforces that power. It's almost like a gravity force as mindfulness develops. It's like like a magnetic attraction that's kind of like, keeps that meditation, that familiar meditation object in your mind. Well, here's an interesting analogy, and I'll read it. So, and then I'll kind of unpack it a little bit. So this is from the Great Stages of the Path, the great treatise on the stages of the path by Lama Tsongkhapa. So it's a traditional analogy. Fixing your attention on an object of meditation in this way and controlling it is said to be like taming an elephant. An elephant trainer ties a wild elephant to a tree or sturdy post with many thick ropes. If it does as the trainer teaches it, then fine. If not, it is subdued and controlled, struck repeatedly with a sharp iron hook. Your mind is like the untamed elephant. You bind it with the rope of mindfulness to the sturdy pillar of an object of meditation, such as I explained above. If you cannot keep it there, you must gradually bring it under control by goading it with the iron hook of vigilance, that is, introspective awareness. It does sound like a little bit harsh for the elephant. And I know nowadays, we're all kind of, justifiably concerned with animal welfare. But this is an analogy. And so there is a little bit, there's kind of the implication of forcefulness in bringing back the attention to the object of meditation, like the breath, for example. So it's not just kind of letting your mind wander all over the place and just observing. And we'll talk about that a little bit, because that is one of the more colloquial definitions of mindfulness, and which can be confusing. But here, there's definitely, without a doubt, some effort required. As Susan so well pointed out, it doesn't have to involve beating yourself up and saying, like, I'm a bad elephant because I got off that rope and I trampled the village and the villagers and everything. You just have to be very forceful in bringing back, well, depending on, your experience, of course, but there is some force required in bringing back your attention to the meditation object. And we'll kind of, refine that a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. I'm all about animal welfare, and I've heard those hooks are illegal now, and it's really sad what happened to the elephants. But politically speaking, I could think of an elephant that needs to be tied to a post and hit with a hook a couple of times.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Sorry.
I'll just, no, it's okay. I'm just going to continue with my presentation. But yes, your advice has been noted. Mindfulness in this presentation is the rope that connects our mind's attention to the chosen object of meditation and sustains that connection over time, keeping the object in awareness. Again, so it's that rope. Familiarity with the object is a key element of this definition of mindfulness, because when we repeatedly attend to the object of meditation over a period of time, we build up many associations of different kinds of experience between our mind and the object of meditation, which forms the basis for enhancing the mindfulness of the object. I can certainly think of examples in my own mind where I might, dwell on something negative, bring it back again and again, some kind of like event in the workplace or interaction with a person that was difficult. And you bring it back again and again, and it just kind of seems to fill your mind. Bringing it back again and again, keeping it in your attention, becoming more and more familiar with it. Why is it always in my mindfulness? Well, because that's how mindfulness works. All right. But we can do the same thing with positive with positive conceptions and mental objects and so on. So by taking care to establish many associations of positive experiences with this object in our meditation, eventually our mindfulness will enable our mind to gladly engage with the object effortlessly without distraction. And there's just a note here, and this is just some commentary from the course designer. He says, having emphasized the importance of a familiar object and the association of the mind, nonetheless, we can still be mindful of objects that we are not familiar with. Well, yeah, like where do we start, right? After all, we must start somewhere in the cultivation of mindfulness. This form of mindfulness, when an unfamiliar object appears to the mind and can be held for only a short time, well, yeah, because it's unfamiliar, can be held only for a short time before being interrupted by distraction, is where most of us start the journey of developing mindfulness. That's really important, because why can't I be mindful? Well, because we're just starting. And until we become really familiar with the object over kind of repeated and consistent exposure to it, and an intense, so clear and vivid exposure to it, until we have that repeated exposure, then we're going to have difficulty keeping something in our mind. So mindfulness, this is kind of like an add-on definition here. This is from His Holiness. He says, mindfulness also means memory, calling to mind, and recollection. For example, it recollects, so this is Buddhist context, it recollects the precepts so that we can live within their boundaries. It prevents the mind from becoming engrossed in sense objects, daydreams, and anxious thoughts. It counteracts absent-mindedness and protects us from non-conscientiousness, being so focused on the plethora of inner preconceptions that we do not pay attention to what is at hand. And again, mindfulness, this is all based on familiarity of whatever it is that we want to promote. So naturally, being familiar with it and being able to hold it in mind makes it very easy to call, to recollect, to bring back, to return to our mind as well. I think that just seems like common sense. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is that it's kind of just seems like it's a consequence of the initial definition of mindfulness.
How does it counteract anxiety? Because you can really get on a roll with anxiety.
Yeah, but sure.
Trying to focus on something, trying to think about something, and it generates anxiety, even though you're thinking about it in a mindful way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would need like, maybe an example. Maybe could you give me an example? Like sort of kind of get it, Susan, but I don't want to say anything unless, because, I'm not sure what's going on in your mind. You're not sure what's going on in my mind.
Oh, for instance, thinking about something in the future that you need to do, you need to move to a different place, and you need to really focus on this. You can't keep putting it on the back burner. And one person wants you to move here, another person wants you to move here, and you end up getting all anxious over it.
Yeah. So to me, that kind of, and I think all of us, have been exposed to that. And so we begin with mindfulness. We use that to increase concentration, and then we develop wisdom. When we have wisdom, that means we can discriminate and decide, determine courses of action, and so on. Doesn't mean it's easy. And I don't know your personal situation. And I'm really just kind of giving like a general answer to your question. But if you are able to like maintain mindfulness in a meditative state where you're relatively kind of relaxed and so on, the mind is clearer, you can concentrate, you can focus on the various aspects of a problem. I'll just be very generic here. You can focus on those, you can concentrate and focus on various aspects of a problem through concentration, and then weigh the different options and so on, and use your wisdom to, come up with some kind of decision. Maybe not easy, maybe not a final decision, but at least a provisional one. So to me, that's how, that's one way mindfulness could be used in order to help with a really difficult, anxious life situation that we all have. Mindfulness is also related very closely to introspective awareness. And introspective awareness will, detect when we're cycling through the same thoughts again and again, getting distracted by them. It will also detect maybe some of the kind of the physical repercussions of having those thoughts. And so we can begin to understand, okay, so there's a difficult life problem where you have to make certain trade-offs and choices and decisions. But dwelling on those when it's not productive can be very difficult and unhelpful, and thus generate anxiety. Part of it too is, when we look at the way our minds work, we do have to kind of put things in the background, for like subconscious processing. I don't know if maybe you've experienced it, where you have this problem that's really bugging you, and then you just go and do something else. Maybe you go outside for a walk or something. You concentrate on something else. You put something out of your mind. And I think that might be an example as well, to allow you kind of your subconscious thought processes to work on a difficult problem, which might have emotional freight and a lot of hard choices. I think that could be another example of using mindfulness to just change the channel for a little bit, and then trust in, your subconscious to help you process something that's difficult. Again, this is just kind of, my own personal experience, a little bit of reading, and so on. But, I'm definitely not any kind of, professional or anything. But I hope that helps.
Yes, that helps. It was just a generic kind of question, a general question that required a general answer, and conceptually how to deal with something, causing anxiety.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And we can put it in the context of, of mindfulness, concentration, wisdom, introspective awareness, and see how our framework works with real life problems. So thank you, Susan.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I mentioned quickly that the word mindfulness is commonly used. You'll see it like, in every blog post and every stream that you follow and so on. But in general, commonly outside of Tibetan Buddhism, so even, and you can, in other lineages, you can encounter this particular definition of mindfulness. And here, people are using the word mindfulness to refer to non-judgmental, kind of a bare awareness of what's happening in the present moment. So we can see this is very different from our working definition of mindfulness. I'm just bringing this up so that when you encounter it, you don't get confused. And this is from mindfulness-based stress reduction. This is from the Wikipedia page about MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. Lorraine, you have a question.
Yes, from the Buddhist perspective, my focus on mindfulness has been tied to the concept of emptiness, because, when you're mindful and you're keenly aware of the present moment, the ego that is the generator of negative karma that exists to distract is not really, it's easier to get away from that, so to speak. So that's been my focus. Not that it's easy or anything, but that's where it is for me, that it ties in with emptiness. I was hoping you could give some perspective on that if you can.
Yeah, okay. So let me say this, and I hope that while I said that there's a different definition, it's for something that is equally as valid. It's just different, and it can be confusing if you encounter the same term used for two very different concepts. So what you just described sounds like quite a bit like the definition of mindfulness used in mindfulness-based stress reduction. And it reduces stress. So it's incredibly important and useful in a whole variety of different contexts. Mindfulness, this one, the contemporary one, let's say, can be understood as the non-judgmental acceptance and investigation of present experience. That sounded like what you were saying. Here they say it can include bodily sensations, internal mental states, thoughts, emotions, impulses, and memories in order to reduce suffering or distress and increase well-being. That's, like an admirable goal. It's just that when you read about mindfulness in that context, and you sort of get which one it is most of the time. In particular, if it's not Tibetan Buddhism, then most likely it's going to be this colloquial definition. Then we're not talking about the one that this course is about. And so I would just leave it at that, Lorraine. You probably have as much or more experience in that form of meditation than I do, as I do rather. And so it's, just highly, as valid to use that kind of attending to your present mental state, just non-judgmentally, and leveraging that to come up with realizations. I don't know if that was what you were looking for, Lorraine.
Well, kind of, but excuse me, it is a very broad issue, especially in the context of mass media and every single little thing. And I'm a little bit encouraged by the whole mindfulness aspect of the whole mom blog aspect of mindfulness. At least it's at least we're going towards something that's not that's healthy, but at the same time it also ironically its own distraction to me from the concept of emptiness. So I try to stay away from the more mainstream stuff.
Yeah So to the extent that, I get what you're saying. So thank you for that clarification. Yeah, to the extent that it helps anyone in any way, it's wonderful. But it's, we're looking at what might be called a deeper presentation, and something that is definitely, when I talk about like the classical traditional definition of mindfulness, something that definitely appears throughout all of Buddhist teachings, from the original Pali scriptures, through all of Mahayana Buddhism. This particular mindfulness, the Sanskrit word is smriti, is just so crucial. It's just baked into everything. At least that's what I find. Well, let me stop talking about this stuff and just give you a brief meditation just to kind of relax, maybe digest a little bit. So we'll do a brief meditation on mindfulness of breathing with relaxation. So this is just a basic, simple, easy, it's easy to read the description here, but it can bring up things. But mindfulness of breathing with relaxation. So if you wish, just kind of settle yourself a little bit in a meditative posture. We'll have a brief prelude about that. But in general, our minds are bound up with our bodies. So we need to incorporate our bodies into meditative practice. In each session, we will do this by first settling the body in its natural state, while imbued with three qualities: relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. So just relax. You can empty your mind. Nothing more to learn at this point, just a few words from me that are actually words from Dr. Alan Wallace. And he gives us a really nice introduction to the posture of meditation. He says it's generally preferable to practice meditation sitting on a cushion with your legs crossed. But if that is uncomfortable, you may either sit on a chair or lie down in the supine position on your back, your head resting on a pillow. Whatever position you assume, let your back be straight and settle your body with a sense of relaxation and ease. Your eyes may be closed, or they may be hooded. That means partly closed, or open as you wish. If you're sitting, you may rest your hands on your knees or in your lap. Your head may be slightly inclined or directed straight ahead, and your tongue may lightly touch your palate. Now bring your awareness to the tactile sensations throughout your body, from the soles of your feet up to the crown of your head. Note in particular the sensations in your shoulders and neck. And if you detect any tightness there, release it. Likewise, be aware of the muscles of your face, your jaw, temples, and forehead, as well as your eyes. And soften any area that feels constricted. Let your face relax like that of a sleeping baby, and set your entire body at ease. Just keep as physically still as you can, avoiding unnecessary movement, such as scratching and fidgeting. You'll find that the stillness of the body helps settle the mind. Now, if you're sitting, assume a posture of vigilance. This is physical vigilance. What is meant by that is slightly raise your sternum so that when you inhale, you feel the sensations of the respiration naturally go to your belly, which expands during the in-breath and retracts during the out-breath. Slightly raising the sternum straightens the back, but in a natural way. This brings a sense of energy to the mind and therefore supports vigilance. Now the main meditation. Be at ease, be still, be vigilant. These three qualities of the body are to be maintained throughout all meditation sessions. So these are physical qualities. Once you have settled your body with these three qualities, take 3 slow, gentle, deep breaths, breathing in and out through the nostrils. Let your awareness permeate your entire body as you do so, noting any sensations that arise in relation to the respiration. Luxuriate in these breaths as if you were receiving a gentle massage from within. Now, settle your respiration in its natural flow. What this means is just let the respirations come long or short, deep or shallow, without any kind of judgment. Just observe. Continue breathing through your nostrils, noting the sensations of the respiration wherever they arise within your body. Observe the entire course of each in and out breath, noting whether it is long or short, deep or shallow, slow or fast. Don't impose any rhythm on your breathing. Attend closely to the respiration, but without willfully influencing it in any way. Let the body breathe as if you were fast asleep, but stay mindfully vigilant. Thoughts are bound to arise involuntarily, and your attention may also be pulled away by noises and other stimuli from your environment. When you note that you have become distracted, instead of tightening up and forcing your attention back to the breath, Simply let go of these thoughts and distractions. Especially with each out-breath, relax your body, release extraneous thoughts, and happily let your attention settle back into the body. It's as if with the out-breath, you're also expelling any distractions, worries, concerns, and so on. When you see that your mind has wandered, don't get upset. Just be happy that you've noticed the distraction and gently return to the breath. This is the actual practice of mindfulness. Not being mindful of the breath for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but noticing when mindfulness has been lost, regaining it and returning the attention to the meditation object. Well, that concludes the meditation. And this is a meditation for relaxation, and it's very important. Sometimes we just begin with relaxation or stick with it until we've achieved a certain level of calmness. And then we're ready for more exacting types of meditation. Did anyone have any thoughts about that particular meditation? Maybe questions, things that might have been said a certain way that didn't make sense, or maybe prompted certain experiences?
No, I liked it.
Yes, very helpful.
Excellent. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time here. I said I would do another meditation. I'll leave it up to you guys. I can go either way. This second meditation will take about 6 or 7 minutes. Or, if you feel like you want to call it here, it's already kind of late. I'm not sure what time it is in South Australia. I knew at one point, but
Yeah,
of course.
I have to leave. I have to go at 7:30.
This class is for you. So thank you very much, everyone. So thank you for attending. We'll do a quick dedication. I'll say a little bit about that. We'll dedicate, and then I'd be very grateful to have you next week as well. And we'll continue on in the our discussion of mindfulness, concentration, wisdom, introspective awareness. So in the Buddhist perspective, the positive energy or virtuous karma, if you will, of the meditation is directed and sealed so that it ripens into a particularly beneficial outcome for oneself and others. A dedication, That's why dedications always happen at the end of some kind of practice, because what we've done together today is create this incredible positive karma just by showing up, listening, assessing, examining, looking at our own experiences and trying to integrate all of this in our own experience, all within the context of the four immeasurables that we recited at the beginning of this session. So we created this incredibly powerful positive karma. And now what we're going to do is we're going to direct it towards a virtuous end. And we won't talk so much about the sealing of it tonight. We'll cover that later in the course. So here's the dedication. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain. Until then, may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen.